What's up, everybody? So I've got my shock back from Koni. This is one of the shocks from the red suspension kit that I initially got when I started the project on the car. It's an old new stock. Came with a set of Koni reds, adjustable dampening off the car. It also has an adjustable spring seat on it that can give another inch lowering on the car. And it came with a set of Vauquelin springs with a 1.8 drop. So this one had a stuck valve in it. I contacted Koni, and of course lifetime warranty, no hassles, no questions, sent it out. Within a week they had it rebuilt and sent back to me. So we're going to get the old stock one off the front driver's side and get this Koni back in there. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and pull all of them and adjust the dampening on them. Right now I've got them 3/4 of a turn towards stiff. I'm going to back them out 1/4 of a turn. While I'm doing that, I'm going to drop the circlip down. One more notch down will give me about another 1/2 inch ride height lower on the car. So yeah, I'll shoot a quick tutorial video of pulling the shocks and the springs from the Accord. Also gonna go ahead and show dropping the circlip down that 1 notch for all the spring seats and adjusting the dampening on it.
Okay, so this is pretty basic suspension work, but just here for anybody that might find this useful. Install and removal is pretty much the same as a stock system. We're going to start off by removing the upper control arm ball joint and the outer tie rod end. Okay, so I'm going to start off removing the cotter pin. I will just go ahead and cut this out. And now we're ready to remove the nut. This is a 17 millimeter. So right here you would probably want to use a separator or a ball joint puller. You can get one from AutoZone or O'Reilly's through the free Loan-A-Tool program, or purchase one if you don't already have one. I've had this out pretty recently, so just a couple whacks with a hammer on the side of the knuckle and it pops right out. Okay, same on the tie rod end. I'm going to remove the cotter pin, 17 millimeter nut, and cautiously, without hitting the boot or threading, a couple whacks on the knuckle, pops right out. Again, if you have not had this out, you're going to definitely need to get a puller. Okay, next we're going to remove the 3 bolts from the shock tower that are holding the top hat to it. Next we're going to remove the bolt and nut from the lower control arm that are holding the shock fork in. Okay, so I lost some video on this section. What we're going to be doing is removing the shock from the fork. So this pinch bolt right here, just going to back that out all the way, and then that'll allow the shock and fork to separate, and they can easily be removed from the car. So I've gone ahead and put the shock back into the fork. That way I have a way to hold it in the vise. I'm going to start off removing the top hat and the spring. Okay, so I picked up a new set of spring compressors off Amazon. The ones I had before were way too thick and scratched everything up pretty bad, so I'm going to give these a try today. Okay, so here I already have the spring compressors placed on the spring, spread as far as they will go from top to bottom, and also placed evenly on each side. And then I'm just going to run it down with a 1/2 inch ratchet, about 3 or 4 turns each side, alternating back and forth until all tension is released from the top hat. Okay, now that the spring tension has been released, we can safely remove the top hat by placing a 14 millimeter wrench over the nut and an Allen wrench into the top of the shock shaft. Okay, now before backing this bolt out, you're going to want to be absolutely certain there's no tension left from the spring against the top hat. I'm now ready to remove the top hat assembly. If this is your first time having one apart, note the position of each piece. You'll also notice I've upgraded my rubber spring mount inside the top hat with an Energy suspension piece. Now I can remove the spring and set that aside, also removing the dust boot and bump stop. Alright, so I'm ready to go ahead and move my circlip down to the lower setting for the spring seat. I want to gently work it up over that ridge, around all the way until it's out, and then pop it down into the lower one. When I do this, I also spin it just to make sure that it is seated properly. Okay, now I'm ready to adjust the dampening. I'm going to go ahead and place it into the vise right here between the threading and the smooth part of the shaft. Once into the vise, I will compress the piston all the way down in and begin to turn it. There is a dip that you'll feel it fall into, and that says it's ready to adjust. All the way left is full soft. Then I'll turn it a 1/2 turn to the right to set it for the stiffness I want. Now I'm ready to reassemble. I'm just going to go ahead and place the fork back in the vise. So right here on the shock there's a little tab that's going to line up with a notch in the fork just behind the pinch bolt. Go ahead and line that up and make sure it's seated properly and reinstall the pinch bolt. Next I'll be installing the dust boot and the bump stop. I've already cut this bump stop to match the right height of the car and attached it to the dust boot. Now I'm going to bring the spring back over the shock and get it seated properly onto the spring seat. Now while reinstalling the top hat, be sure to put the pieces back in reverse order that they came off. Once you have all the pieces back in place, go ahead and place a 14mm over the nylon locking nut. And once again, be sure to hold the dampening shaft in place with an Allen wrench. Torque to 22 foot-pounds. Now I'm ready to go ahead and remove the spring compressors. I'm going to evenly back them out, alternating from each side until all tension's released back onto the top hat, and remove them from the spring. Okay, right here I've placed the dampening fork and the shock back into the car separately. I reattached them and torqued the pinch bolt to 32 foot-pounds. Now I'll raise the top hat up into the shock mount. Now installing the 3 nuts back onto the shock mount to hold the top hat in place and torque those to 28 foot-pounds. And looks like I missed shooting this part. You're going to want to go ahead and reattach the shock fork to the lower control arm and insert the through bolt and torque to 47 foot-pounds. Now I'm ready to go ahead and reconnect the upper control arm ball joint to the steering knuckle. I'm going to hold that in and thread on the nut all the way by hand. Once threaded all the way on and tightened, that will be torqued to 32 foot-pounds. Then insert a new cotter pin, bending it over and around the bolt. Alright, so I'm ready to go ahead and do the tie rod end. I'm actually in the middle of slowly replacing all the pieces on the car with energy suspension, so here I'm putting on an energy suspension dust boot with some fresh grease. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and hold it into the knuckle, thread on the bolt, and torque to 32 foot-pounds. And lastly, a fresh cotter pin. Now I'm ready to go ahead and attach the brake line to the shock with the 2 10mm bolts. Just a quick shot here of the energy suspension pieces I added, new dust boots, of course the top hat has the new pieces in it, and also the sway bar end links. Alright, so in the rear I've already got the back seat down. After that, remove the piece of trim along the rear deck. And then we're going to remove this corner piece. There's one tab at the top and one at the bottom. Remove those and pop it out, and that will give us access for the 2 mounting nuts. And right here we're going to go ahead and remove the shock to knuckle through bolt. Be aware that these do sometimes rust in and can also cause damage to the bushing. Alright, once all the mounting nuts have been removed, I'm ready to go ahead and remove the assembly. I'll put a little pressure here on the rear disc and pop the lower part of the shock off of the knuckle. Once that's done, I will lift it back up and to the right. Then I can slowly begin to work the lower part of the shock over to the left. Once I've worked it all the way over, I then have clearance at the top and can remove the assembly. Alright, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. Disassembly of the rear is the same as the front, just follow the same procedure. You definitely want to be aware that going into this, you're probably going to have some things be stuck, especially on the rear lower shock mounting through bolts. Those can get rusted into the bushing there and tear the bushing up. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and please like and subscribe.